Thank you for tuning back into the Only You podcast. It's your boy, Lo Jackson. And I have taken a few weeks off because I have had a mad cold, and these colds are like super bugs, flying around, knocking people down, all that good stuff. But this is October. I had my first interview on this podcast, which I felt like I wanted to give that time to resonate and simmer and steam you guys up for another third season. I'm working a lot of hours right now at a new job. I'm thankful that I have a job. I'm thankful and grateful for my life. This is a new season. And today I'm going to be reading to you a book that's in controversy right now called The Last President. If you haven't checked it out, you need to get out there and check it out. It's actually one of the most interesting books I've heard in a while, just for the fact that it's so controversial right now. And it's controversial just for the fact that the writer actually wrote a book called The Adventures of Barron Trump. And Barron Trump is President Donald Trump's youngest son with Melania. He's a young guy, but everybody's out there, the conspiracy theorists think that he's a time traveler. I'm like, oh my goodness, you guys. So back in 1980, Donald Trump liked to use a pseudonym when he wanted to separate himself from terrible information. Maybe it had something to do with something that he owned or he wasn't proud of, but he actually liked the name John Barron. And in 1990 or 1991, President Donald Trump was actually forced under oath to reveal his source, and he revealed that it was himself, John Barron. And when he got with Melania, he decided that he loved the name Barron so much that he was going to name his son Barron. And I don't believe that Ingersoll Lockwood, the guy who wrote The Last President in 1896, planned on, 100 and some years later, all this stuff coming out and people just getting so wild about Barron Trump. But dude, that would be cool if Barron Trump went on to become the last president. I mean, come on. Most democracies only last 300 years, and that's what I believe this guy in office is trying to prove now. I do want to say that this book has so many different insights to Chicago and New York City, and most of the stuff inside this book pertains to them. And it actually says in this book at one point that we will all join hands in Chicago, blacks and whites, and the police won't scuff or howl at us anymore. Because, in which, I mean, it's kind of interesting because we've had so many problems in Chicago and New York City with crime and, defund the police. And I understand why that lady up there started pushing for defund the police. When your police become pretty much gangsters, it's a eye-opening situation. Look in Illinois. Illinois has cars that they use to pull people over with and get on them and tell them that, hey, it's illegal to have that kind of limo tent. Hey, you can't do that to your spoiler here. And they would ticket you and fine you. But now all of a sudden the police force in Illinois, they're riding around in SUVs with limo tent that have rims. And it's interesting how they have taken away gang members' cars because they look that way, and now the police are in unmarked police cars that are looking like gangbanger cars to me. You go to Indiana, it's not like that. They have flat out white police cars with lights on the top. You go to Michigan, they have a blue police car with a big red siren, and you definitely see that thing because it's like a lighthouse when it goes off. So thank you guys for listening to the Only You podcast. And like I said, I took a break to let my first podcast of this season kind of resonate with my crowd and my fans. And I wanted to see what the fans were doing out there, if they were passing me on, or if I was getting stagnant, or if anybody was sharing me or following me, because those are important things in this podcast. And if you got any good ideas about what I should share or what I should read, please feel free, reach out. It is Domestic Violence Awareness Month here in October, and I have a university course in domestic violence, and we're going to dive into that during this episode too, so hold tight. I do want to share with you today The Last President. I want to talk to you a little bit about the author, and then we'll dive right in. Thank you for listening once again. On average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. During 1 year, this equates to more than 10 million women and men. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience severe intimate partner physical violence. Intimate partner contact sexual violence and or intimate partner stalking with impacts such as injury, fearfulness, post-traumatic stress disorder, use of victim services, contraction of sexually transmitted diseases, and etc. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner. This includes a range of behaviors: slapping, shoving, pushing, and in some cases might not be considered domestic violence. 1 in 7 women and 1 in 25 men have been injured by an intimate partner. 1 in 10 women have been raped by an intimate partner. Data is unable to show just male victims or female victims. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have been victims of severe physical violence, beating, burning, or strangling by an intimate partner in their lifetime. 1 in 7 women and 1 in 18 men have been stalked by an intimate partner during their lifetime to the point in which they felt very fearful or believed they or someone close to them would be harmed or even killed. On a typical day, there are more than 20,000 phone calls placed to domestic violence hotlines nationwide. The presence of a gun in a domestic violence situation increases the risk of homicide by 500%. Intimate partner violence accounts for 15% of all violent crime. Women between the ages of 18 and 24 are the most commonly abused by an intimate partner. 19% of domestic violence involves a weapon. Domestic victimization is correlated with a higher rate of depression and suicidal behavior. Only 34% of people who are injured by intimate partners receive medical care for their injuries. 1 in 5 women and 1 in 71 men in the United States has been raped by their lifetime partner. Almost half of females, 46.7%, and male, 44.9% victims of rape in the United States were raped by an acquaintance. Of these, 45.4% of female rape victims and 29% of male rape victims were raped by an intimate partner. Stalking. 19.3 million women and 5.1 million men in the United States have been stalked in their lifetime. 60.8% of female stalking victims and 43.5% men reported being stalked by a current or former intimate partner. And I want to share with you, when I was in high school, I was in 9th grade. A senior wanted to go on a date, which, I mean, when you're that age, obviously we date to find the person we want to spend the rest of our lives with. I go out with this girl, and I think I'm the coolest guy ever. You know, we're dating for like 5 days. She has a car. We're out driving around. I'm like, oh, man, this is awesome. Because I just entered high school. So anyways, like the end of the week on a Friday, she was like, I love you so much. I love you on the phone, you know. And I'm thinking to myself, girl, you just met me. I'm like, how could you love me? You know, I'm like, love ain't just something that happens like, I mean, yeah, you feel lustful feelings, but come on. So anyways, I tried to think logically. I'm a logic thinker. That same night, her mom breaks in on the phone. She was like, you don't even know the meaning of love. And I'm like, holy cow. It was like a knockdown, drag out fight. Glass breaking, doors slamming. And like, I listened for 5 minutes, and then the mom comes back on. And she was like, Lo. She's like, this girl has been with 20 guys since her freshman year. She's like, I know your parents. I don't want this to go on for you. You need to break up with her. So, well, I was alarmed. It was her mom telling me to. So obviously I did. And I told her the next day of school, I'm like, I don't want to go out. I hardly know you. I was freaked out, honestly. I was terrified. Because it was just a lot, you know. So anyways, and I was new at school too. So that next day there's a football game. And I'm standing there talking to my buddies, and next thing I know, she comes up and puts her arms around me. I'm like, girl, come on. I'm like, I don't want to do this. I'm like, I hardly know you. Dude, this chick doubles up, starts swinging down on me. I'm like dodging fists left and right. I'm like, holy crap. The cops come over there and they flat out pretty much detain that girl. And she's never allowed at a football game for the rest of her high school career after that, because she had caused so many instances during her 4 years. But, when we're that age, so much is going on in the human brain, and I wasn't trying to judge her. I just didn't want to get in a situation where I felt like I could be hurt or be forced to have to, fight for my life or something stupid. Well, as time went on, she drove by my house for almost a year screaming my name. She would call from other numbers once caller ID came out and, tell me how much she loved me. And then she would leave letters in the mailbox. And, man, it was rough, because I was scared. I was scared out of my mind. I didn't know what to think or do, but a buddy of mine winds up dating her, and they fall in love hardcore. They date, and I think they dated for 4 years or something. It was pretty wild, but it was a domestic situation of stalking, and the most domesticized people in the United States are actually the elderly. And elderly people are abused because, they take care of kids and they act a certain way. The dad drank all the time, or the mom was gone all the time, or whatever. And then once the kid gets to take care of them, they mistreat them as though they deserve that. But we as human beings have no idea the social pressures or norms that were put on people long ago, because now there's a lot of relief to a lot of different people that were oppressed, and we need to know that we have actually evolved from that, and we need to understand that some people need us to be better than them, because they actually didn't know, what they were really supposed to be acting like or doing at the time when they were mistreating their loved ones or whatever. But thank you guys for listening again, and hopefully my voice ain't annoying you with this terrible cold that I've had for a couple weeks, few weeks, whatever it's been. Thank you guys for following me, and thank you for sharing me. It does mean a lot. And this podcast is built on you guys listening and me sharing information that I hope reaches home and helps you develop a relationship with yourself that's unbreakable. And sometimes we got to remember that there's an individual circle, and it's called the individual you. And then there's another circle that's bigger than that circle, and that's the outside world. And it's always pressing down upon your soul, your spirit, your mind. And people are always trying to influence you in every single different direction to think this or that, to change your paradigm, which that's okay. But then again, we need to know that our individual self is something that's very important, but sought after from others, because they want to have what we have and they want to be what they can't be. And there's a lot of things going on in the world that some of us aren't understanding. And today we're going to be doing The Last President. And I want to share with you this book because it's controversy, but then again, it's interesting the way a man's mind thought 100 and some years ago about this republic. And I feel it now. And you do too. And we all do. And we're all struggling. And we all got a lot of things going on that shouldn't be going on. And we got a lot of things that we don't understand that we should understand. So when I feel these things are going on in my life, it's time to get to work. It's time to put the shit down and pick up what's right and to do what's right. And if you don't like it, don't do it. Find something else that you enjoy. Find what means something to you. When you get that excitement in your stomach and your heart, don't deny your second understanding, and that's your stomach. Never, ever go against your gut instinct. Thank you again. It was a strange sight, and yet an impressive one. One, withal, a great party struggling for long-deferred rights, free men jealous of their liberties, bound together with the steel hooks of determination that only death might break asunder. Sunday came in at last, and still the struggle went on. The people know no days when their liberties are at stake, cried the leader of the house. The Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Many of the speeches delivered on that famous Sunday sounded more like the lamentations of Jeremiah, the earnest and burning utterances of a Paul, or the scholarly and well-rounded periods of an Apollos. The weary hours were lightened by the singing of hymns by the Southern members, most of them good Methodists, in which their friends and sympathizers in the galleries joined full-throated and fuller-hearted, while at times clear, resonant, and in perfect unison the voices of the staunch men of the North broke in and drowned out the religious song with the majestic and soul-stirring measures of John Brown's body. The glory, glory, hallelujah, of which seemed to hush the tumult of the chamber like weird chant of some invisible chorus breaking into upon the fierce rotting of the Belshazzar's feast. And if you don't know who Belshazzar is, Belshazzar it means Bel, protect the king. It was Hebrew, was the son and crown prince, just to let you know. Somewhat after 11 o'clock, an ominous silence sank upon the opposing camps. The Republican leaders could be seen conferring together nervously. It was a sacred hour of night, thrice scared sacred for the great republic. Not only a new year, but a new century was about to break upon the world. A strange hush crept over the turbulent house and its still more turbulent galleries. The Republican leader rose to his feet. His voice sounded cold and hollow. Strong men shivered as they listened. Mr. Speaker, we have done our duty in our country. We have nothing more to say. No more blows to strike. We cannot stand here within the sacred precedence of this chamber and see our rights as free men trampled beneath the feet of the majority. We have striven to prevent the downfall of the republic like men sworn to the battle against wrong and tyranny. But there comes a time when blank despair seizes upon the hearts of those who struggle against overwhelming odds. That hour has sounded for us. We believe our people, the great and generous people of the North, will cry unto us, well done, good and faithful servants. If we do wrong, let them condemn us. We, every man of us, Mr. Speaker, have but this moment sworn not to stand within this chamber and witness the passage of this act. Therefore we go. Not so, my countrymen, cried a clear, metallic, far-reaching voice that sounded through the chamber with an almost supernatural ring to it. In an instant, every head was turned and thousands of voices burst out with suppressed force. The president! The president! In truth, it was he, standing at the bar of the house, wearing the visage of death rather than of life. The next instant, the house and galleries burst into deafening clamor, which rolled up and back in mighty waves that shook the very walls that was no stilling it. Again and again it burst forth, the mingling of 10,000 words, howling, rumbling, and groaning like the warring elements of nature. Sometimes the president stretching forth his great white hands, appealing for silence, while the dew of mingled dread and anguish beaded on his brow and trickled down his cheeks in liquid supplication that his people might either slay him or listen to him. The tumult stilled its fury for a moment, and he could be heard saying brokenly, "My countrymen, oh, my countrymen." But the sharp sound of the gavel cut him short. "The president must withdraw," said the speaker. calmly and coldly. His presence here is a menace to our free deliberation. Again, the tumult set up its deafening roar, while a look of almost horror overspread the countenance of the chief magistrate. And I do want to stop right here and tell you a little bit about this author, because you'll understand kind of where he's coming from a little bit more. Ingersoll Lockwood was born on August 2nd, 1841. He actually had the unfortunate death of September 30th, 1918, was an American lawyer and writer. He wrote children's novels, including the Baron Trump novels, which I'm sure President Donald Trump probably read those in his lifetime. And it tickled him to death, I'm sure, because it was his last name, and it was something about him, you know. Ingersoll Lockwood wrote some of his nonfiction under the pseudonym Irwin Longman, so he used a pseudonym too, see? So that's probably honestly where Trump had gotten it. Ingersoll Lockwood, he was actually born in Ossing, New York. He was the son of Munson Ingersoll and Sarah Lewis Lockwood. Munson Lockwood, like his two older brothers, Ralph and Albert, was a lawyer and an intimate friend of Henry Clay. And if you don't know who Henry Clay was, he was an American lawyer, statesman from Kentucky. He was also a U.S. senator. However, Munson primarily achieved prominence during his military service and civic activism. He was a general in the New York State Militia, a great admirer and Hungarian statesman, and a freedom fighter. Leo Kossuth, I should say, was the freedom fighter that influenced him. And Ingersoll Lockwood actually sent money over there that he had made to fund that freedom fighter. Ingersoll Lockwood went on to become a consul to the Kingdom of Hanover by Abraham Lincoln. And so this book, to me, honestly, I will give you my own opinion. He really believed in this book that the South was going to take over the U.S. House and the Senate and the presidency, and that the South was going to rise again. And that's the feeling I got from this book. So that's what made it so odd that everybody just jumped on and made it so controversial, which I get it. I mean, I connected the dots right away about the pseudonym once I read, about Ingersoll Lockwood and where he came from, and that he used the pseudonym. So obviously President Trump read this stuff when he was a kid. So, I mean, a lot of things are formed when you're a kid, and you carry them on into adulthood, and you do things that you think or thought were interesting and cool, and you kind of become in life all the people or things that you love. A little bit of this and a little bit of that. And thank you guys for listening to the Only You podcast. And I just wanted to share a little bit about the author so you kind of get an understanding when he talks about the North and stuff like that. So back to the wonderful book that we're reading today, and that book is The Last President by Ingersoll Lockwood. There was a tone of godlike authority in these few words, almost divine enough to make the winds obey and the tempestuous sea. In deepest silence and with a certain show of rude and native grandeur of bearing, the senators made their entrance into the chamber. The members of the House rising and the Speaker advancing to meet the Vice President. The spectacle was grand and moving. Tears gathered in the eyes long unused to them, and at an almost imperceptible nod of the President's head, the chaplain raised his voice in prayer. He prayed in accents that were so gentle and so persuasive they must have turned the hardest hearts to blessed thoughts of peace, love, and fraternity and union. And then again, all eyes were fixed with intensest strain upon the face of the President. Gentlemen of the House of Representatives, this measure upon which you are now deliberating, with a sudden blow that startled every living soul within its hearing, the Speaker's gavel fell. The President said he with a superb dignity that called down from the galleries a burst of deafening applause, must not make reference to pending legislation. The Constitution guarantees him the right from time to time to give to the Congress information of the Union. He must keep himself strictly within the lines of the constitutional limit or withdraw from the bar of the House. A deadly pallor overspread the face of the chief magistrate till it seemed he must sink then and there into that sleep which knows no awakening. But he gasped. He leaned forward. He raised his hand again, imploringly. As he did so, the bells of the city began to toll the hour of midnight. The new year, the new century is born, but with the last stroke, a fearful and thunderous discharge, as 1,000 monster pieces of artillery shook the Capitol to its very foundation, making the stoutest hearts stand still, and the blanching cheeks had never known the coward color. The doom of the Capitol had been destroyed by dynamite. In a few moments, when it was seen that the chamber had suffered no harm, the lead of the House moved the final passage of the act. The President was led away, and the Republican senators and representatives passed slowly out of the disfigured Capitol, while the tellers prepared to take the voice of the House. And the tellers would be the news, I'm sure. Nowadays, that's my own thought. The bells were ringing a glad welcome to the new century, but a solemn tolling would have been a fitter thing, for the Republic of Washington was no more. It had died so peacefully that the world could not believe the tidings of its passing away. As the dawn broke cold and gray, and its first dim light fell upon that shattered dome, glorious even its ruins, a single human eye, filled with a gleam of devilish joy, looked up at it long and steadily, and then its owner was caught up and lost in the surging mass of humanity that held the Capitol girt around and around. That was actually the ending of The Last President. And I wanted to start there because I felt it was really capturing that last little bit of it. So I'm going to go back to the beginning now, so hold tight. That was a terrible night for the great city of New York. The night of Tuesday, November 3rd, 1896. The city staggered under the blow like a huge ocean liner with plunges. Full speed, the terrific crash into a mighty iceberg and recoils shattered and trembling like an aspen. The people were gathered, light-hearted and confident, at the evening meal. When the news burst upon them, it was like a thunderbolt out of an azure sky. Altgeld holds Illinois hard and fast in Democratic line. This elects Bryan President of the United States. Strange to say, the people in the upper portion of the city made no movement to rush out of their houses and collect in the public square, although the night was clear and beautiful. They sat as if paralyzed with a nameless dread, and when they conversed, it was with bated breath and throbbing hearts. In less than an hour and a half, mounted policemen dashed through the streets, calling out, "Keep within your houses, close your doors and barricade them. The entire east side is in a state of uproar. Mobs of vast size are organizing under the lead of anarchists and socialists, and threaten to plunder and despoil the houses of rich who have wronged and oppressed them for so many years. Keep within your doors, extinguish all lights." Happily, Governor J.B. Pritzker was in town, and although a deeper pallor overcame the ashen hue of age as he spoke, yet there was no tremor in his voice. "Let the 7th, 22nd, and 71st regiments be ordered under arms." In a few moments, hundreds of messengers could be heard racing through the silent streets, summoning the members of these regiments to their armories. And I did want to say that J.B. Pritzker is the second richest politician opposed to Donald Trump. Slowly, and socialism was started in Chicago under the New Ideal movement. Slowly, but with astonishing nerve and steadiness, the mobs pushed the police northward, and although the force stood the onslaught with magnificent courage, yet beckoned back the dark masses of infuriated beings surging up again with renewed fury and strength, with the troops be in time to save the city. Was the whispered inquiry among the knots of police officials who were directing the movements of their men? About 9 o'clock, with deafening outcries, the mob, like a four-headed monster breathing fire and flame, raced toward burst rage into Union Square. The police force was exhausted, but their front was still like a wall of stone, save that was movable. The mob crowded it steadily to the north, while the air quivered and was rent with mad versification of the victors. Bryan is elected. Our day has come at last. Down with our oppressors. Death to the rich man. Death to the gold bugs. Death to the capitalist. Give us back the money you have ground out of us. Give us back the marrow of our bones which you have used to grease the wheels of your chariots. The police force was now almost helpless. The men still used their sticks, but the blows were ineffectual and only served to increase the rage of the vast hordes now advancing upon Madison Square. The Fifth Avenue Hotel will be the first to feel the fury of the mob. Would the troops be in time to save it? And a half cheer, a half cry of joy goes up. It is inarticulate. Men draw a long breath. Women drop upon their knees and strain their eyes. They can hear something, but they cannot see as yet, for the gas houses and the electric plants have been destroyed by the mob. Early in the evening, they preferred to fight in the dark or by the flames of rich men's abodes. Again a cheer goes up, louder and clearer this time, followed by cries of, "They are coming! They are coming!" Yes, they were coming. The 22nd down Broadway, the 7th down Madison Avenue, both on double quick time. In a moment or so, there were a few bugle calls and a few spoken commands rang out clear and sharp, and then the two regiments stretched across the entire square, literally from wall to wall, in line of battle. The mob was upon them. With this slender line of troops, could it hold such a mighty mass of men in check? The answer was a deafening discharge of firearms, a terrific crack, such as some thunderbolts make when they explode. A wall of fire blazed across the square. Again and again it blazed forth. The mob halted, stood fast, wavered, fell back, advanced again. And at that moment there came a rattle as of huge knives in the distance. It was the gallant 71st charging up 23rd Street and taking the mob on the flank. Hopefully you guys are enjoying this. This guy is a pretty wild writer. He has a lot of great insights here. And you can hear it in the words he uses. You can feel the pain that these people are going through being charged by the military, because honestly, those times are upon us and we need to think about that. This is chapter 2. Great as has been the world's wonder at the uprising of Mr. Bryan's struggling masses in the city by the sea and the narrow escape of its magnificent homes from fire and brand, yet greater still was the wonderment when the news was flashed across the land that Chicago did not stand in need of a single federal soldier. Chicago was mad, but it is the madness of joy. Chicago was the hands of a mob Chicago is in the hands of a mob, but it is a mob made up of her own people, noisy, rude, and boisterous, the natural exaltation of a sudden enfranchised class, but bent on no other mischief than glorying over the villainous and self-seeking souls who have ground the faces of the poor and turned the pitiless screw of the social and political power into hearts of the common people until its last thread had been reached. The despair pressed its lupine visage hard against the door of the laboring man. And yet, at the moment when the night air quivered with the mad vociferations of the common people, that the Lord had been good to them, that the wicked money changers had been driven from the temple, that the stony-hearted users were beaten at last, and that the people's William was at the helm now, that peace and plenty would be in a few moons come back to the poor man's cottage, that silver was king. King at last. The world still went wandering, why red-eyed anarchy as she stood in Haymarket Square, with thin arms aloft, with wild mien and wilder gesticulation, drew no bomb of dynamite from her bosom to hurl at the hatred minions of the law, who were silent spectators of this delirium of joy. Why was it thus? Look, and you shall know why White Rob Peace kept step from this turbulent band and turned its thought from red-handed pillage. He was there, the master spirit, to hold them in leash. He and he alone had lifted Bryan to his great eminence. Without these 24 electoral votes, Bryan had been doomed, hopelessly doomed. He and he alone had held the great commonwealth of the West hard and fast in the Democratic line. Hence came as conqueror, as kingmaker, and the very walls of the sky, touching edifices, trembled as he was dragged through the crowded streets by this orderly mob, and 10 times 10,000 of his creatures bellowed his name and shook their hats aloft in mad exultation. You're our savior. You clean the temple of liberty of its foul horde of users. We salute you. We call you kingmaker. Bryan shall call you master too. You shall have your reward. You shall stand behind the throne. Your wisdom shall make us whole. You shall purge the land of this unlawful crowd of moneylenders. You shall save the republic. You are greater than Washington. You're a better friend of ours than Lincoln. You'll do more for us than Grant. We are your slaves. We salute you. We thank you. We bless you. Hurrah, hurrah, hurrah. But yet, this vast throng of tamed monsters, this mighty mob of momentary good-natured haters of established order, broke away from the master's control for a few brief moments and dipped their hands in the enemy's blood. The deed was swift as it was terrible. There were but 4 of them, unarmed, on pleasure bent. At sight of these men, 1,000 throats belched out a deep and awful growl of hatred. They were brave men, and backed against the wall to die like brave men, stricken down, beaten, torn, trampled, dragged. It was quick work. They had faced howling savages in the far west, painted monsters in human form, but never had they heard such yells leave the throats of men, and so they died. 4 brave men, clad in blue livery of the Republic, whose only crime was that some months back against the solemn protest of the master. Their comrades had set foot on the soil of the Commonwealth and saved the metropolis of the West from the hands of the same mob. And so Chicago celebrated the election of the new president, who was to free the land from the grasp of the moneylenders and undo the banned business of years of unholy union between barterers and sellers of human toil and the lawmakers of the land. Throughout the length and breadth of the South and beyond the Great Divide, the news struck hamlet and village like the glad tidings of a new evangel, almost as potent for human happiness as the heavenly message of 2,000 years ago. Bells rang out in joy, acclaim, and the very stars trembled at the telling, and the telling over and over of what had been done for the poor man by his brethren of the north and around the blazing pine knots of the southern cabin and in front of the mining camp fires of the far west. The cry went up, "Silver is king, silver is king." Black palms and white were clasped in this strange love fest, and the dark-skinned grandchild no longer felt the sting of the lash on his sire's shoulder. All was peace and goodwill, for the people were at last victorious over their enemies, who had taxed and tied them into a very living death. Now the laborer would not only be worthy of his hire, but it would be paid to him in a people's dollar for the people's good. And now the rich man's coffers would be made to yield up their ill-gotten gain, and the sun would look upon this broad and fair land and find no man without a market for the product of his labor. Henceforth the rich man should, as was right and proper, pay a royal sum for the privilege of his happiness, and take the nation's taxes on his broad shoulders where they belong. Thank you guys for listening to the Only You podcast, and hopefully you've enjoyed The Last President, because it was a controversial book at the time. Right now, I wanted to reiterate that people who have these conspiracy theories that President Donald Trump's son, Barron Trump, is a time traveler and all this. No, in reality, Donald Trump read these books. I don't know this is factual, but come on. Put two and two together. I just told you that the author of this book had a pseudonym. When I was a kid, I used to do similar things because we become like the people we love and honor and respect. And it is Domestic Violence Awareness Month here at the Only You in October. And I do want to say that children and domestic violence, 1 in 15 children are exposed to an intimate partner violence each year, and 90% of these children are eyewitnesses to this violence. The economic impact, victims of intimate partner violence lost a total of 8 million days of pay each year. The cost of intimate partner violence exceeds $8.3 billion per year. Between 21 to 60% of victims of intimate partner violence lose their jobs due to reasons stemming from the abuse. Between 2003 and 2008, 142 women were murdered in their workplace by their abuser. 78% of women killed in the workplace during this time frame. I mean, that is horrible. Those are terrible statistics, but I want to make you guys aware of that because this is what the Only You podcast is about. We have an awareness that we do with every podcast here, and I hope that you guys are learning some cool information just so that you're self-aware and aware that, domestic violence is body language too. Like I tell you in my other podcasts, conversations, 9% vocal, 37% tonality, and the rest is all body language. So when I'm talking to somebody, I'm looking at your body language. Do you accept me, or are you acting really silly and acting skittish and weird? Because that lets me know what kind of person you are on the inside and that I need to steer clear of that. The physical and mental impact of domestic violence. Women abused by their intimate partner are more vulnerable to contracting HIV and other STDs due to forced intercourse and prolonged exposure to stress. Studies suggest that there is a relationship between intimate partner violence and depression and suicidal behavior, which I went over that earlier. Physical, mental, and sexual productive health effects have been linked with intimate partner violence, including adolescent pregnancy, unintended pregnancy in general. Thank you guys for listening to the Only You podcast, and thank you for sharing me. Please share me. And thank you guys for listening in India, Australia. Thank you so much for the 5-star reviews that I do get. I am appreciative of any input on my podcast. So if you want to be interviewed on my podcast, please reach out. It's the Only You podcast 2022 at Gmail. And if you want to be interviewed or if you want to send your story, just email me voice clips of your story and I will edit them and I will get you on the podcast. Trust me. Just tell your story and I'll get it out there for you if you want to be heard. Thank you guys again for listening. And please feel free to reach out. Email me voice clips of your story. If you have any domestic violence stories that you think people got to hear this, it's important, please email me the voice clip and I will figure out a way to get it heard on this podcast. It is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and this was The Last President by Ingersoll, Lockwood. And thank you again so much for listening, and sorry for my voice and sorry for taking such a long break, everybody, but I'm back. And I do want to share one more story with you. When I was 10, my sister was 14. She started dating a guy that lived a few blocks away. He was, I think, 17 or 18. And she told him that she didn't want to be with him, and she broke up and she started going out with somebody else. And I remember it was summertime. She asked my parents if she could walk up to the gas station and get a pizza and, bring it back. And my parents allowed her to take my little sister with her. And at the time, I think my little sister was probably like 5 or 6. So my older sister and my little sister got up about a block away from home. There was a big, huge Catholic church there, and the guy that she had broke up with had been hiding in the bushes, and he had been coming by the house. He had been calling from different numbers. He proceeded to jump out of the bush. He grabbed my older sister by the arm, and then he decided to beat on her right there in front of my little sister, in which my little sister then turned around and ran home because she was terrified. And it was only about a block and a half from the house. But I'm not sure exactly what happened to him. But many domestic situations arise because a lot of people aren't doing the work they need to do on themselves to be called a man or be called a woman. I mean, women now, they have a thing called women privilege where, you cater to me and I just do nothing for you. And a lot of men talk about that stuff, but then women like to talk about toxic masculinity. And I think that if we as human beings did more work on ourselves and we focused on that little individual circle and realized when people in the outside world were trying to influence you as opposed to just being an absorber, there wouldn't be so many different divisions that are out there among us in societal situations all over the world. But thank you guys for listening. Thank you for following me, and thank you for sharing me again. This is your boy Lo. Until next time, hopefully you enjoy The Last President by Ingersoll Lockwood.